Hi, good morning, and welcome to 30 Days of Transformation, Building Better Mental Health and Resilience and Authentic Thriving. Today is day 4, and our 3 bullet points for transformation today have to do with intention setting or Someculpa. Yesterday I suggested some homework of trying to find these like one positive thing to add to your routine, to add to your schedule that is going to be beneficial for body, mind, or spirit, and had some nice comments. Sarah suggested lying flat a couple of times a day. I think that's one of the best things that I've ever done for myself, is when I just stop everything and lie down. I like to elevate my legs when I do that. And Sandy suggested this idea of pausing in the morning before you go on with your day, and just remembering, being grateful, or remembering and taking deep breaths. I think that that's a wonderful habit, and actually that's a traditional yoga technique of stopping and noticing in the morning, in those moments when you're just becoming conscious, and setting the intention for your day. And it's so powerful. I really appreciate the suggestion, Sandy. It's so powerful and so healthful. Now, one thing to remember is that, when you are working with trying to make changes in your life, that what the research shows is that it's more effective to add positive habits than it is to try to take away the negative stuff. And that reminds me of a story when I was quite young, and I was learning meditation, and I said to my teacher was like, well, in the yoga tradition, they suggest that you limit the amount of flesh food that you eat, and you don't drink alcohol, and blah, 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 and all these things. And I was like, oh, that sounds like not a lot of fun. And I remember saying to her, well, like, what if I don't want to do those things? And she said to me, well, don't worry about it. Just add your meditation and then see what happens. And it was interesting to watch how, as meditation became more important to me and more of a priority, what I had to do was take better care of myself so that I could meditate, So it was more like I had to go to bed earlier, and I wasn't as interested in partying. I was in my 20s, but I'd lost some of the interest in that. And, so I had started things started shifting because of my priorities started shifting. And it's not like I live this perfectly healthy, clean life, but certainly I'm more in that direction than I was when I was younger. I think that happens with age to some extent, and sort of figuring out what your priorities are. But I definitely think that meditation facilitates that process too, because it helps get really clear about what's meaningful and purposeful for you in your life. So going back to this idea of Someculpa for today, where we're going to continue with positive habit building. That's my second bullet point. But I wanted to talk about Someculpa a little bit. I started talking about it yesterday a little bit. I talked about Ishvara Pranidhan, which is like a spiritual commitment. And then Someculpa is the word that famously means like setting a positive intention. And the most famous Someculpa is the story of the Buddha, for sure. And so he was a spiritual seeker. Well, first he was a prince, but then he became a spiritual seeker, and he was hanging out with all these yogi kind of guys, and trying all these different techniques, including long fasting, and trying to find these techniques that would help him self-realize. And he kind of was, I guess, sort of disillusioned, or he was just sort of finished with all of these techniques. He just felt like, that's not working for me. So what he did was he said, I'm going to set a Someculpa. I'm going to take this intention that until I achieve realization, I won't get up from my meditation. So Buddha famously sat, and then he fought against all of the depraving forces of his mind, and finally overcame and achieved enlightenment, became the Buddha. So that story, or that parable, is one that helps us to understand that there is this sort of overarching or big intention that's possible in our lives of self-realization, because it's the idea is that everyone has the capacity to do that. And so, it doesn't mean that we should feel like that there's this huge lofty goal and we're insufficient to achieve that. That's not the point of the story. This point of the story is more that this is what the sages and the saints and the Buddhas are pointing to, is that it is possible to know ourselves better, to find ourselves. But what that requires is some kind of a deep intention, some kind of a deep longing in ourselves. There's another famous story about Ramakrishna, and he was with a bunch of his disciples, and one of his disciples said to him, well, how will I know that I'm close to self-realization? And Ramakrishna Ramakrishna didn't say anything. And then later that day, he brutally took the guy. They were bathing in the ghats, these little ponds where they bathe in India. And he came up behind the guy, and he took his head and he shoved his head down in the water, and he was like holding him down there. And then after a little bit, he let him come back up, and the guy went, and he said, Master, why did you do that to me? And Ramakrishna said, when you want God as much as you've wanted that breath, then you'll know you're close. So this idea that there has to be this desire within us to want to know ourselves too. It's not just, it has to come from within. It's not just something that we can take on from without. But I do think that the desire develops more and more as we do more practices, as we commit to those practices. So how do you get to the practices is the point, and that's where Someculpa comes in. And I do like the idea of a strong or firm intention. This is my intention. Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I fall short. Last night I stayed out too late. One of my teachers is here right now, Gary Kraft says, we stayed out too late. And, it's my meditation. I didn't do as much meditation. It's not a matter of like beating yourself up or like having to be so strict and sticking to this perfect schedule. It's more a matter of like, that's my intention, right? So if that's your intention, then then the possibility is there for getting to know yourself better, and getting to know yourself better lends itself to being clearer about your intention and more focused about your actions, right? So how do you get to know yourself better? So set that intention with a sense of kindness. That's the first principle of yoga, ahimsa, non-harming kindness. Set it with an intention of, I want to build positive habits into my life. Whatever it is, if it's waking up in the morning and taking a few breaths and remembering to be grateful for your life, if it's lying on the floor and putting your legs up and being still. And I certainly recommend a few minutes of formal seated meditation, whether it's sitting in a chair or sitting on the floor and softening your eyes and following your breath, and then using mantra, because mantra helps to direct that intention. I think that that's something that's very important to incorporate into your life. And we'll talk a lot more about that over these next 30 days. And then the last bullet point for today is compassionate self-discipline, right? So you need that combination of kindness. It's not about beating yourself up for not being perfect. It's about wanting to build these habits into your life that are going to be so helpful for you. So the positive habit building, kindness, positive habit building, and then compassionately helping yourself, holding yourself accountable is really the key here. So I appreciate you being here. Please feel free to leave a comment. I'll get to all the comments eventually. I'll be training all day today, but I'll get to all the comments eventually. And I'll see you tomorrow where we'll continue this conversation about Someculpa. Namaste.